This woman was following a strange man who seemed to live in prehistoric times. Suddenly, the woman's eyes caught sight of a skeleton of a giant beast. Next to it was a statue thousands of meters high, never seen before in the world. Only then did the woman realize that she had traveled to another world. This was a magical world with 4 witches ruling the 4 directions of east, west, south, and north. 2 years ago, a disaster had suddenly occurred here. The 4 witches had joined forces to resist, but it was useless. The southern witch even sacrificed herself. At that moment, a magician had appeared and summoned a stone giant. Thanks to that, they had prevented the disaster from happening. Since then, he had become the magician who rules the entire OS. He also created many magical things such as drones with unlimited energy and an extremely impressive projector. Through the footage that the drone brought back, the magician saw a car falling from a giant tornado, and it was the tornado that caused the woman to travel to this world. The woman did not know that her whereabouts had been discovered by the magician, and he had ordered the guards to investigate and kill her. At the moment of landing, Dorothy accidentally bumped into a woman in red. She went to check and found that the woman was dead, so she took clothes and gun from the car. She also followed the dog and prepared to find her way home. But soon after that, she met a native child. That's why the child led her to his tribe. At this time, Dorothy noticed that the whole tribe seemed to be holding some kind of ceremony. As she got closer, she discovered that they were holding a funeral for the woman in red. When the chief learned that Dorothy had killed the witch East, he thought that Dorothy was also a witch. After discussing, the chief decided to personally take Dorothy to the Emerald City. Then he stopped at the border, and here he instructed Dorothy to just follow the golden path to reach the Emerald City. The chief also told Dorothy that if she wanted to return home, she might have to ask the magician for help. So Dorothy began her journey to the Emerald City, but soon she saw a wounded man nailed to a board. Out of kindness, she saved the man and helped him bandage his wounds. After talking, she learned that the man had lost his memory. He didn't even know who he was, so she named him Lucas. It was getting dark now. The two decided to rest for the night before continuing their journey. Then they fell asleep. Suddenly, the witch of the East, whom Dorothy had accidentally stabbed to death, appeared again. It turned out that she wasn't dead but was only in a temporary coma. After waking up, the witch immediately went to Dorothy. As soon as East asked Dorothy about her purpose of coming here, the gun in her bag caught East's attention. Although the witch had seen many things, she had never seen this kind of weapon. East asked Dorothy what it was, but she only replied that it was very dangerous and could lead to death. But East was a little disdainful because she was a supreme witch. How could this small black object kill her? In this world, only witches could kill witches. Then East continued to ask Dorothy how to use the gun. At that time, Dorothy took advantage of the situation to make East point the gun at herself. Unexpectedly, Dorothy's words tricked this arrogant witch. Then East pulled the trigger. The bullet hit her right in the middle of her forehead, and so she left this world. At the same time, in the distant Emerald City, the Western witch felt her older sister die. She screamed in pain. Looking at the witch's body, Dorothy was also a little confused because this was not her original intention. She had just come to this strange world. When Dorothy was about to leave, something strange happened. The witch's magic glove appeared on her hand and even merged into her body. At this time, Dorothy did not know that she had inherited magical powers from East. Dorothy and Lucas then continued on their way to the Emerald City. Because Lucas had lost his memory, he had to go with Dorothy. But after they went a short distance, his wound became infected. If they did not find medicine, his life might be in danger. They asked a farmer and found a herbalist. After taking the medicine, Lucas's wound also improved. But Dorothy discovered a secret of the herbalist. On the second floor of the house, she saw a prisoner. That person gave a distress signal. After asking the herbalist, Dorothy found out that the herbalist had been keeping a very sick boy in her custody for a long time. She had raised the boy since he was a child. The reason the herbalist kept Tip in her custody was to protect him. Tip needed to take special medicine every day to stay alive. However, the boy did not want to live such a life. Listening to the herbalist, Dorothy temporarily understood her intentions. But at night, she discovered that the herbalist had put poison in Lucas's medicine. In a moment of crisis, she put charcoal in the water for Lucas to drink. This temporarily reduced the effect of the poison. Dorothy's anger flared up. It was clear that this herbalist was not a good person. While the herbalist was sleeping, Dorothy released the imprisoned boy. Thanks to that, Tip and his best friend successfully escaped. But when Dorothy and Lucas were about to leave, the herbalist woke up. Seeing the child being released, she became furious and rushed to strangle Dorothy. Dorothy. She even tried to force poison into Dorothy's mouth. Lucas finally came to her rescue. Meanwhile, Tip and Jack ran to a forest. They dreamed of a free life in the future. But when the two boys spent the night in the wilderness, something strange happened. Tip suddenly turned into a girl. This sudden change made Tip quite confused, but after thinking about it, they guessed that this might be the result of the disease the herbalist had mentioned. However, they did not want to go back. Finally, they decided to go to the nearest big city, Evercity. They hoped that there would be a cure for Tip, but when they found a herbalist there, he said that the medicine Tip had taken was a dark medicine. It had changed Tip's nature. In fact, Tip was originally a girl. This news shocked Tip greatly. The girl could not accept her current appearance. Jack tried to comfort Tip. He promised that whether Tip was a boy or a girl, he would always be by her side. Suddenly, Jack approached and kissed Tip. This unexpected action made the girl even angrier. Even though Jack apologized and tried to calm the atmosphere, Tip shouted that Jack did not know anything about her life. In her emotions, Tip accidentally pushed Jack down. The death of her best friend officially broke Tip. The girl came to a bridge and was about to jump off to leave this world. At this moment, a soldier stopped her. He said that he could help Tip change her fate. So Tip was taken to the Witch Academy by the soldier, and her hatred of everything was noticed by the Western Witch. Tip thus became the Western Witch's favorite student. But what the girl did not expect was that Jack, after falling from a high place, was still not dead. A female doctor saved Jack when he was about to die. This female doctor lived in Evercity and possessed advanced technology beyond the times. She used machinery to create a new body for Jack. Even the heart was artificial. At first, Jack had a lot of difficulty controlling this body, but after a few days of hard training, he gradually got used to his iron body. When Jack's body was completely restored, the female doctor took him to the royal district of Evercity. The cost of creating Jack's body was paid for by the royal family, and the princess had her eyes on Jack. She wanted to make him her servant. Elsewhere, Dorothy and Lucas were on their way to Emerald City. They came across a circus. They told them that the magician had been looking for Dorothy everywhere. It was obvious that asking the magician to help her return home was impossible, so the two decided to change their plans. They headed to the castle of the Eastern Witch. According to the circus people, the Eastern Witch could control the weather, and Dorothy was swept away by a tornado here, so she hoped to use the tornado at castle to return home. But when the two arrived at the castle, they found that the Eastern Witch guards were still guarding there. Seeing the two, the guards immediately drew their swords, intending to kill them. At this moment, Dorothy stepped forward and persuaded the crowd. The magic gloves that had merged with her body suddenly appeared. Seeing the sign of the gloves, the guards thought that Dorothy was the new Eastern Witch. Dorothy originally planned to use this method to sneak into the castle. Then she would use the tornado to return, but the guards told her that she needed to perform the inauguration ceremony and then use magic to stabilize the current weather. Dorothy changed into her clothes and looked no different from a real witch. The guards then led Dorothy and Lucas into a mysterious room. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal. Above it was a giant tornado. Perhaps if she stepped on this stone pedestal, she would be able to return to her old world. As the tornado slowly swept her away, suddenly both the tornado and Dorothy disappeared. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in an icy world. But the strange thing was that this was not her old world either. At that moment, Dorothy saw her mother's name on a piece of clothing. She was extremely surprised. She wondered why her mother's clothes were in another world. Before she could react, Dorothy was caught in a tornado again and returned to OS. Determined to know the truth, Dorothy no longer cared about controlling the weather. She just wanted to quickly find out why her mother's clothes appeared here. However, it was these questions that exposed Dorothy's disguise. At this time, the guards finally realized that Dorothy was not their witch. In fact, she was just an intruder. Dorothy also revealed the truth to him soon after. But at this time, the tornado was completely out of control, and the castle was about to be destroyed. Dorothy and Lucas hurriedly ran away, but the guard with absolute loyalty decided to leave this world himself. He wanted to follow the Eastern Witch. When Dorothy and Lucas had just run out of the castle, the tornado also lifted the castle into the air. At this time, the doubts in Dorothy's mind increased. Why did the magician of OS want to get rid of her? Why did her mother's belongings appear here? Only the magician could answer all of these questions. So, they once again set off for the Emerald City. They passed through the Scream Forest. A little girl suddenly rushed out and hugged Lucas. This surprised two of them, but it seemed like this girl actually knew Lucas, and they even discovered that she couldn't hear what they were saying. Dorothy pulled the girl's hair out. She found a pair of earplugs in the girl's ears. When Lucas took them out, her expression suddenly became very tense. She seemed to be very afraid of the noise outside. Dorothy quickly put the earplugs back in the girl's ears. Seeing the girl alone in the forest, Dorothy thought that the girl might have gotten lost from a nearby village, so they took the girl to the village to ask. However, after asking around and no one knew which family the girl belonged to, at that moment a couple appeared and claimed to be her parents. They used some candy to lure the girl to follow them. Dorothy suspected their identity and offered to go home with them. When she arrived at their house, Dorothy discovered that the couple were just scammers because there was no sign of the girl's presence in the house. But before she could act, Lucas pulled her out. The soldiers sent by the magician had arrived at the village. If they were discovered, they would definitely be caught. However, Dorothy could not leave the girl alone, so she and Lucas changed clothes. Then she sneaked back to the couple's house. What happened next was hard for Dorothy to believe. The girl was shaking in fear, and the couple had turned into two stone statues. Dorothy guessed that the girl was a witch. She reassured the girl, but no matter how hard she tried, Dorothy could not pull her hand away. It turned out that the girl was held too tightly by the statue. Reluctantly, Dorothy had to use a large hammer to smash the statue to rescue the girl. As they were about to leave the village, they were discovered by an officer of the Emerald City Guard. The officer stared at Dorothy's sword. He asked where the owner of the sword was. He even slapped her. The girl stood beside Dorothy, trembling with fear. The officer, unaware of his own status, still pulled the girl back to threaten her. Dorothy was cornered, so she pulled out her gun and shot into the air to scare the soldiers. At this moment, Lucas suddenly pulled Dorothy and the girl to escape. The officer looked and called John's name. He did not realize the danger of the gun in Dorothy's hand. He rushed straight towards them. Dorothy was forced to shoot him in the shoulder to escape the chase. Afterwards, they returned to the Scream Forest and discussed what had happened during the day. Lucas's identity became more and more mysterious. However, during the time the two were together, special feelings arose between them. To break the tense atmosphere, Dorothy played music for Lucas through her headphones. The two gradually got closer to each other in the soft music. The next morning, Lucas heard someone approaching. They decided to separate and run away and meet again at another location. But as soon as they separated, Lucas met the officer from the day before, and Dorothy was shot by a dart. When she woke up, she was in the territory of the Western Witch. The Western Witch questioned Dorothy about what kind of magic she had used to kill her older sister. Dorothy asked the Western Witch to take her gun. She planned to use the same method to get rid of her, but it was obvious that the Western Witch was much smarter than her older sister. Dorothy could not hide her panic when the gun was pointed at her. Seeing this, the Western Witch understood that the gun should be pointed at someone else, not at herself. She did not hesitate to pull the trigger, but at that moment, the gun did not fire a single bullet. It turned out that Dorothy had accidentally removed the magazine last time, and that careless action had saved her life. Feeling deceived, the Western Witch decided to punish Dorothy. She wanted Dorothy to live a life worse than death. She directly used her ultimate magic on Dorothy. She controlled Dorothy like a puppet and lifted her into the air. The more pain Dorothy felt, the more excited the Western Witch became. Tip, who was standing next to her, recognized Dorothy early on, but because Tip was now in the form of a girl, Dorothy did not recognize her. Finally, the Western Witch used magic to throw Dorothy hard to the ground. At that moment, the magic glove hidden in Dorothy's body appeared. Seeing this, the Western Witch wanted to step forward to take it off, but the energy from the glove resisted. Therefore, she temporarily stopped torturing Dorothy. During this short period of time, Tip also secretly took out the key to the secret underground exit. She helped Dorothy escape. However, Dorothy did not leave the Emerald City, but instead put on a mask and took advantage of the darkness to sneak into the magician's castle. She was surprised to see the decorations in the castle. She even heard popular songs from her world. At this moment, Dorothy realized that the magician could also be someone from her world. When Dorothy mentioned her mother's name, the magician immediately said her name correctly. It turned out that the magician's real name was Frank. He had previously worked with Dorothy's mother in a research company, but he was just a maintenance worker, while Dorothy's mother was a PhD scientist. During their research on tornadoes, they discovered something magical. Tornadoes could travel to other worlds. Frank saw this opportunity and deliberately tampered with the device. He released a tornado in the laboratory. The tornado swept them to the OS Kingdom. When he arrived in this world, Frank realized that their technology was nothing more than magic. The other two went to the Eastern Witch for help to return, but Frank did not want to return. Instead, he used tricks to become the powerful magician of the OS Kingdom. From then on, anyone caught in the tornado was ordered to be killed by him. He only wanted to protect his position. Knowing that Frank used to know her mother, Dorothy asked him to take her back. However, the magician asked Dorothy to help him kill two other witches, because he knew that she had recently used a gun to kill the Eastern Witch. Dorothy did not want to hurt anyone just to go home, so the magician offered another deal. As long as she gave him the gun, he would release Lucas and the witch Anna. At the same time, he promised to bring her back later. Dorothy agreed to this deal. The next day, Dorothy left the Emerald City with Lucas and Anna. However, they faced another problem. Now they knew that Anna was a witch, but should they take her to the Northern Witch? While Dorothy and Lucas were discussing, a pack of gray wolves suddenly rushed out of the forest. Anna was wearing earplugs and was unaware of the approaching danger. In a pinch, Dorothy once again summoned her magic gloves. She released her energy and drove the wolves away. In order to avoid a similar situation, Dorothy calmed Anna down. She gradually took off her earplugs. Under Dorothy's guidance, Anna gradually adapted to the sounds of the outside world. Over time, she also became dependent on Dorothy. The next morning, Dorothy told Lucas about her intention to persuade the Northern Witch not to fight the magician, so that Anna would not have to participate in this battle, and she could also return home with peace of mind. The next day, they arrived at the castle of the Northern Witch, Glinda. But when Dorothy met Glinda, she saw a shocking scene. Glinda stepped forward and kissed Lucas. This kiss brought Lucas's memories back completely. It turned out that Lucas was Glinda's husband. During a mission, he was ambushed by the magician's men. This activated the curse that Glinda had placed on him. Now, Lucas returned to Glinda's side to confront the magician of the OS Kingdom with her. Meanwhile, Dorothy was temporarily imprisoned, and Anna was sent to the Witch Academy to begin her studies. There were many people like her in this place, but all of them had no expressions. It seemed that all their emotions had been taken away. Even when Anna saw Lucas and tried to greet him, she was disappointed by Lucas's indifference. The other little witches deliberately teased Anna. They used magic to move her bowl. Anna immediately turned her bowl into stone, but she only received mocking laughter from everyone. At dinner time, the same thing happened again. This time, Anna was really angry. She tried to use her powers to pull the bowl back, but Anna couldn't do it, so everyone looked at her with contempt. Unexpectedly, Anna then used magic to pull all their bowls in front of her. Strangely, instead of being angry, they applauded Anna. It turned out that the witches here would later become warriors against powerful witches, and they had to learn how to be brave. But during this almost sick training process, many girls couldn't stand the pressure. In the end, they were imprisoned and went crazy. Witnessing the fate of these girls, Dorothy was extremely angry, and the magic in her body also appeared. She immediately rushed into Glinda's room. With just a wave of her hand, the blanket wrapped Glinda tightly. Then, it strangled her and hung her in the air. Suddenly, Lucas ran over to stop her. However, Dorothy seemed to have lost control at this moment. No matter how Lucas tried to persuade her, it was useless. It was only when Lucas yelled at her that Dorothy stopped. Seeing the man she loved say such words made Dorothy completely disappointed. Then, Dorothy went to Anna's room and said she wanted to take her away. But Anna was not moved at all. It turned out that during the past few days of training, the girl had completely changed. Seeing the situation like this, Dorothy could only leave sadly. She rode her white horse back to the house where the two of them used to live together. At that moment, Lucas suddenly appeared from behind. He was ordered by Glinda to kill Dorothy. Although he couldn't bear to kill her for many reasons, he was forced to do so. Lucas was heartbroken and prepared to kill Dorothy. Suddenly, her little dog pounced on Lucas and bit him. Thanks to that, Dorothy had a chance to escape. But Lucas was an experienced warrior. He quickly chased after Dorothy. However, at this moment, Lucas kept telling her to kill him, as if there were two different personalities in Lucas's body. Dorothy pulled out a small knife from her waist and stabbed Lucas. Then, she tied Lucas to a wooden post, just like when they first met. It was as if he had never appeared in her life. A few days later, Dorothy returned to the tribe where she had fallen from the tornado. Here, she finally understood the truth about the poor witches ruling the OS. It turned out that the giants were not controlled by the witches, but by the curse of the chief's wife. In fact, the witch had threatened their tribe. Therefore, they were forced to help the witch hide the truth. In Dorothy's eyes, the witches and Glinda were not good people. And in the end, the ones who suffered in this war were still the civilians and innocent children. So Dorothy went to the imprisoned chief's wife. Dorothy asked her to return the curse to her. Dorothy promised to bring peace to OS. Hearing Dorothy's words, the chief's wife was extremely happy, because this was also the outcome they wanted the most. That way, she would have no regrets, even if she died. On the other side, Frank was also preparing for the Great War. He invited the Princess of Ever City to Emerald City to discuss cooperation. Ever City had a very developed manufacturing industry, and as long as they produced guns and bullets, they would no longer be afraid of immortal beasts or witches. The princess had also witnessed the power of the weapons with her own eyes, so she agreed to this cooperation. However, there were some interesting things that happened on this trip to Emerald City. Jack was now the princess's servant, but her arrogance also made him feel uncomfortable. In fact, the princess also really wanted a friend. One day, Jack secretly followed the princess to attend the Lantern Festival, but they encountered a group group of thugs blocking their way. Jack's act of protecting the princess despite the danger to his life made the princess start to have feelings for him. At the same time, Jack accidentally met Tip, his old best friend. Tip also couldn't believe that Jack was still alive. Although she sincerely apologized, Jack couldn't forgive her, and Jack said that they could never go back to the way they were. Tip tried to tell Jack that she had realized that she truly loved him, but Jack said that it didn't make any sense for Tip to say that now. At this time, the princess appeared and realized the difference between the two, and very quickly, she also guessed that Tip was the one who had pushed Jack down. Even so, he still did not mention the change in his body. Seeing that, the princess ordered Jack to take off his shirt. Reluctantly, Jack could only follow the order. Witnessing that terrifying scene, Tip finally realized that she had completely lost this friend. But from Jack's eyes, it could be seen that he still cared about her very much. On the way back, Jack even argued with the princess about this. In anger, the princess chased him out of the carriage, but as soon as he got out of the carriage, he fell right into a mud hole next to it. At first, Jack did not pay attention and continued moving, but at night, he discovered that his legs had become extremely stiff until he could no longer move. Jack had to pull up his pants to check. It turned out that his body had rusted from being soaked in water. He shouted for help, but there was no one in the forest. Just like that, Jack stood there until night. When he was almost desperate, the princess came riding a white horse. She brought lubricating oil and poured it on his mechanical legs. After applying the oil all over his body, Jack returned to normal. They returned to Ever City. After that, Jack and the princess also opened their hearts and truly came together. But their happy life did not last long. The blacksmith in Ever City produced a large number of guns based on Dorothy's gun. The princess understood the cunning of the OS magician very well. So on the day of the exchange, she pointed the gun barrel at Frank, and she asked him to bring 10 barrels of gold. This completely angered him. Frank arranged for several assassins to hide in the barrels of gold. Waiting until midnight, when the kingdom's guards were off guard, the assassins broke into the princess's room and kidnapped her. The Ever City soldiers did not dare to act rashly. At this time, Jack wanted to attack the magician from behind, but as soon as he pulled the trigger, he was discovered by Frank. Unfortunately, the bullet hit Princess. The person he loved died right in front of him, causing Jack to suffer immensely. He hugged the princess's body in pain. After that, Jack went to the doctor with the hope that she could save the princess like she had saved him, but Dr. Jane said that the princess was not dead. The next scene shocked Jack. Dr. Jane used a knife to cut Princess's face. It turned out that the princess had been completely transformed into a robot for a long time. 2 years ago, the city of Ever had been attacked by immortal creatures, and the princess died at that time. Dr. Jane had tried to save the princess by regenerating other parts. The reason the princess often wore a mask was to hide her face that never aged. The original cause of the collapse of the city of Ever was also due to the evil of the magician. Knowing the truth, Jack decided to take advantage of his iron armor. He picked up the axe and prepared to kill the magician. What was unexpected was that Jack, wearing the iron armor, actually stormed the magician's camp alone. When he was about to kill the magician with an axe, Frank told Dr. Jane that her daughter was in OS, and this saved his life. It turned out that Dr. Jane was Dorothy's mother. At the same time, Dorothy used the curse she got from the native tribe to summon the stone giant. She went to the battlefield. Dr. Jane saw Dorothy in front of her. She was about to take her daughter back when the sky suddenly appeared, countless insects flying towards the battlefield. All the soldiers and Dorothy were trapped in it. At this time, her magic glove appeared, and in a flash, all the insects around were frozen. The northern witch Glinda stepped out from the middle of the insects. Dorothy still tried to persuade Glinda to take the witches back to the north and stop fighting, but Glinda looked disdainful. She called Anna to her side and thanked Dorothy for protecting Anna. Anna's special ability made Glinda no longer afraid of the stone giant. When Glinda gave the order, Anna began to cast her spell, and from afar, the stone giant was completely destroyed. Its body was shattered into pieces. Seeing this scene, Dorothy chanted her spell again. She controlled the stone giant of the Emerald City to stab the center of the witch's temple with a spear. Under the temple was the source of the witch's power, and their power was instantly reduced many times. Surrounding insects also turned back into ashes. But at that moment, Frank shot Anna, causing the stone giant to fall. Smoke and dust covered the entire battlefield. War was about to break out, and the witches' soldiers used guns to take down the witches one by one. Anna's sacrifice also completely angered Dorothy. Her magic gloves emitted an unprecedented light. With just a wave of Dorothy's hand, all the surrounding soldiers were sent flying. She walked towards the magician step by step, but he still did not repent and said that he was saving OS. Just as Dorothy was about to pull the trigger to shoot him, the dead witches around him suddenly came back to life. They all walked to Glinda's side and called her master. It turned out that these guns could not kill witches at all. Only witches could kill witches. At this point, Frank had completely failed. Dorothy led him to the witch's castle. Then, she asked him to use a tornado to return to the old world with her. But even though he failed, the magician still did not want to go back. In order to prevent Dorothy from taking him back, he said that Dorothy's mother was still in OS. But Dorothy no longer believed anything he said. In the end, Frank even intended to destroy the tornado machine. At this moment, Dr. Jane suddenly opened fire and fired a warning shot at him. Dorothy grabbed him, while Jane furiously scolded him for his stupid stubbornness. In the extreme anger, even her mother came over without Dorothy recognizing her. At this time, Dr. Jane proved her identity through the birthmark on her hand. Seeing the mother she had missed for so long, Dorothy was extremely moved. She had many questions to ask, but Jane interrupted. It turned out that this machine was originally invented by her mother in the past. She wanted to return, but the machine was taken over by the magician. Jane also said that she would return home with Dorothy, but when Dorothy entered the machine, her mother suddenly closed the door. Jane did not explain much. She only said that all this was to protect her daughter. When the tornado gradually disappeared, Dorothy also disappeared. When she woke up, she found herself back in the old world. But that was not the end of the story. After the magician failed, the OS country was still in disaster. The day before the Northern Witch and the magician were about to fight, the Western Witch found Tip holding a jeweled dagger. She asked Tip where the dagger came from. When she learned that Tip had carried it with her since she was little, she immediately guessed Tip's identity. This was an item that the previous king of OS had left for his daughter. Based on Tip's age, she guessed that Tip was likely the missing princess. It turned out that Tip's adoptive mother had turned her into a boy just to protect her. She did not expect that Western Witch's acceptance of a disciple would lead to this surprising discovery. Before Tip could react, she had already hugged the girl and flown into the air. When they landed, they were already in the basement of the sanctuary. This was where all the magic of dead witches was stored. The Western Witch asked Tip to drink the magic that her older sister had left behind. Thanks to that, Tip was able to restore the OS kingdom that belonged to her. After drinking the magic cup, Tip's body began to convulse. Images from her childhood appeared in her mind. As a child, Tip had witnessed a man wearing a lion mask killing her parents. When Tip woke up, she had the power of the supreme sorceress. Tip immediately transformed herself into a boy. Then, the two rescued the witches who were imprisoned by the magician. West gathered everyone. Then, she asked them to support Tip as emperor to reclaim the Emerald City and re-establish the OS kingdom. However, these witches suspected that the Western Witch wanted to rule for herself because Tip was a boy. Immediately, all the sorceresses cast a spell to execute the Western Witch on the spot. Then Tip stepped out. No longer confused about her gender, she transformed back into a princess and released a powerful, magical power. Tip passed on the image of her parents being murdered that she had witnessed with her own eyes to everyone. Finally, everyone recognized her as a princess. Then they headed towards the Emerald City. Since the magician had led the army to the battlefield of the Northern Witch, they easily broke down the city gates. The officer with the lion's head also realized that he was at a disadvantage. He knelt before Tip. However, she did not kill him immediately. She used magic to erase all of his family's memories of him. Although Eamon's family was standing before him, they could not recognize their son. This was the cruelest punishment for Eamon. After that, he was banished and never allowed to enter the Emerald City again. At the same time, the Northern Witch Glinda led the witches to the Emerald City. What she did not expect was that the Western Witch had found the daughter of the former king. But the truth was like that, and Glinda could not change that. However, they were all wrong. What they should really fear is the immortal beast from afar in the dark prison. A skinned man escaped from his bonds. He shakily took a piece of human skin from a tree branch and cut it into pieces with a knife. Finally, he wore the skin like clothes. Then, his body began to transform. A pair of giant wings grew from his back. The legendary immortal beast had reappeared in the OS kingdom. It had been 2 months since Dorothy returned to the real world. However, she was still confused about that strange experience. She did not know if the OS kingdom was real or just a product of a dream, until one day, she suddenly saw Lucas appear before her. At this time, she was sure that her time travel to another world was real. Lucas came this time to take her back to the OS country once again. He asked her to save the OS kingdom and rescue her mother there. And this was also the final scene of the movie. Thank you for your interest and follow-up. Goodbye, and see you again.